Victor Gavrilov. I'm the Assistant Dean for Careers in Technology and Tech Ventures. I'm class of 2015. I studied computer science and economics, and I was a software engineer and a software engineering manager for almost 9 years in various companies, both in the San Francisco Bay Area and in New York, and remotely from Providence, where I live right now. And in February of this year, I joined Brown in my capacity as assistant dean to help students break into tech careers. That's a brand new position that hasn't existed before, and I'm super excited about this one. I love coaching folks one-on-one on their career journeys, and this has been a really fun time so far. I'm going to start sharing my screen. These are all of our awesome alumni panelists today. We have Adam, Dan, Joel, Mustafa, Pam, Patrick, and Tiffany. And I'd like to start off with Adam. Please introduce yourself to us, just in a brief, maybe less than a minute or so.
Thanks, Victor. Yeah, I'll add some definition to this very sparse bio. Also, really excited to be here today. I'm Adam, class of 2018. My concentration was development studies, which I don't think exists at Brown anymore.
It does not. It's actually my wife's concentration. That's incredible. Yeah, right on.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's such a small cohort. All right, we got to talk about this later.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So it's like adjacent to international relations. I've been in tech for 6 years, product management for 5. So started out in consumer fintech at a very early stage startup that was acquired, and then moved to a Series B fintech startup and was with them through pre-IPO phase. And then they eventually went public market via a SPAC. And now I work for OpenTable on the B2B software side. So yeah, experience across sort of range of verticals and types of products. And let's see, what else? Yeah, I think that's all. I'll just throw out there that, again, not a technical background. So if anyone out there is interested in moving into product management and you don't have a CS degree or an engineering degree, happy to chat.
I love that so much. Just yesterday, we had a panel as well on just various tech careers, and we learned how little your concentration has to end up mattering in your job later on. So I really like that. Thanks so much for offering that, Adam. Dan, over to you.
Hey, folks. Hopefully my audio is okay. My name is Dan. I was class of 2015 as well with Victor. CS degree. And I am one of the weirdos who took the CS degree into the PM track. Yeah, I've been in B2B SaaS for 9 years in various product roles. More recently, I've been leading product teams. And I actually just left my position, but up until last Wednesday, I was a senior director of product at a company called AuditBoard. We were a late stage startup that we kind of pseudo exited via acquisition by a PE firm, as is more in vogue nowadays with IPOs being what they are. So yeah, ask me anything about SaaS, about product. I have tried to keep up some sense of technical chops as well, but I'll be the first one to admit that I'm probably useless in a production code environment. So
can't do everything. Product is a lot. Product is a lot. Thank you.
We try, you know.
Thank you, Dan. Joel, over to you, please.
Hi, I am currently the CTO and co-founder for a small startup called HireGuide. Before this, I led assessments engineering, which is a venture bet at Brown, doing things like skill assessments and screening questions and stuff like that. And before that, I led machine learning infrastructure at Brown. at LinkedIn. I went to Brown graduated in 2005. I did CS PhD program. I don't know if any of you are UTAs, but I fondly remember getting graded by UTAs while I was there. That was interesting. I was in the Air Force for 21 years and mixed in with my Air Force time. And a little bit afterwards, I was also a professor doing applied machine learning and digital forensics. While at LinkedIn, I was massively involved in interviewing. And in total, I've done at least 600 engineering interviews and built a lot of LinkedIn's process.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it. Yeah, the TA program is really popular at Brown right now. I think we have 400 TAs in the CS department at the moment.
I bet that's
Mustafa is not here, so I'll skip over Mustafa for now and I'll go to Pam.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Pam Brown. I graduated from Brown University back in 1998. And I've been with Amazon Web Services for about 4 years. I lead a team of product managers at the moment with within their training and certification organization, specifically working on their AWS certifications. I've been in product management, I think at this point, but for about, I don't know, 13 years. Similar to somebody else, my career has meandered. I did not. I was a history major, and somehow went from international development to public policy to finance for a while, and then education, and now I'm at Amazon. So happy to talk about how to take advantage of that career jungle gym.
Thank you, Pam. Patrick.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I was a class of 2009, and I stuck around for a fifth-year master's and for 2010. I was part of the UTA program. I TA'd for 4 of the 5 years that I was at Brown, including through my master's. So I graded anyone who went through that. I probably graded you. I worked a lot with Spike and Andy if they're still there. I've been strictly technical for my career since. I've worked at a number of startups in robotics, which I kind of stumbled into, even though my background was primarily graphics at Brown. And since then, I've been in robotics with iRobot, with consumer electronics, a company called Jibo. We were top inventions of 2017. We were the cover, and then we were out of business 6 months later because consumer electronics is hard. Robotics goes through all the other things too. We got like third-party logistics, moving boxes around for packaging, and now I'm in autonomous trucking with Aurora Innovations. And like I said, I've been through all this. I've been pretty strictly on the technical side of things. So unlike the people who had sort of meandering careers to get to tech roles, I've been technical the whole time.
Yeah, and same here, Patrick. Me as well. No, there's multiple ways. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Patrick. Tiffany.
Good morning, everybody. Tiffany Iser. I graduated from Brown class of 07 as a biochemical engineer. I've worked in research and development and factory side roles in consumer goods, food and beverage, and now I work at Unilever as the head of R&D for our beauty and well-being North America portfolio. So that's all of our hair care and skincare brands like Dove, Tresemme, Nexus, Vaseline. And you could read the rest of the bio on the screen. I think when it comes to technology, you might ask, what does that have to do with consumer packaged goods? We are very digitally enabled, both from a digital R&D standpoint and how we use big data to understand how we can develop better for our consumers, as well as on the factory side. Software engineers, controls engineers were my bread and butter right-hand men and women when I worked in those roles, as we have semi-autonomous large portions of factories. So happy to talk about what it looks like to have a career outside of tech, heavily leveraging tech. And what we look for as we're in the interview process for, say, internships or full-time roles that might be in our digital R&D team or otherwise leveraging technology.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and so we can see each other this way. And I'll go over into questions. So the first question I have is, if I can find my notes right there, and I'm going to post it in the chat so it's a little bit easier to follow. Is this one. What are some essential steps you recommend candidates take when preparing for a technical interview? And I'm going to start with Dan and then move to other people as they appear on my screen. Go for it, Dan.
Sure. So I'd say, I think the biggest thing is just knowing the game. I think a lot of folks have a lot of things to say about the relevance of technical interviews, and like there's a lot of differing opinions on like if they're they're a good gauge of actual skill. Um, you know, I'm a pragmatist about this stuff. Like, spend the time. It will show up, especially right now as the job market is tight for entry level roles. Know what you've got to do to stand out, and achieve, you know, the minimum bar that gets you through these very high volumes of candidates all vying for a very limited number of roles. So yeah, you know, do your algorithms, do your design problems, do your homework, and show up
Yeah.
well. And obviously, you know, don't do them just to know them at surface level. Know the real thought process behind them. But this is the game we all play right now.
Thanks. Then I have a follow-up question for you. Why do you say that know the kind of like underneath layer as well, not just the surface level things?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like you should try to obtain some value from this, right? Like we all, I think, can acknowledge to some extent that those exercises don't necessarily reflect your day-to-day job very much. So, you know, like get some value out of it. Like I think the advantage of doing this stuff and, you know, really looking into it is eventually you can um pattern match, and you can be more kind of adept and agile with your reasoning and stuff like that when you're working on a real problem. I think seeing a variety of things is also quite helpful, just so you can look at different techniques and see how they might apply in the future. But yeah, like yeah, I think, you know, it's good just to as like a mental exercise, basically.
Totally. Thank you, Dan. Adam, how would you answer this question?
Yeah, sure. So I'll add to what Dan was just saying. I think understanding the underlying concepts or the first principles, whether it's, you know, technical and like, you know, coding interview or design is important for the reasons Dan described, but also so that you can go a level deeper with the interviewer when they poke and ask why you made a specific recommendation, and just have that richness of reasoning. But other than doing your homework, I would say there are like some soft preparation elements that I think are really important, right? So mindset, right? If you're not convinced that you're going to succeed, you're not going to convince the interviewer that you're a good candidate. So spend some time, you know, on that, whether it's, you know, through meditation or anything else you like to do. Just, I think going in with a really strong mindset is important. And then, you know, diet, exercise, sleep, just be in a really good place going into those interviews. I mean, the interviewer is likely going to poke and prod you. And so if you don't have that good foundation of mindset, you know, plenty of sleep, etc., it's likely in that high pressure environment that you'll, if not crumble outright, just not do as well as you can.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Joel.
Yeah. Going back to the previous one about knowing the fundamentals, one of the things that like there's two styles that you run into on the coding interviews, and one is like I call the speed challenge. Somebody wants you to do as many leak codes as possible at a given time, but the other pattern is ask a question and like the ideal candidate finishes that question in 20 minutes, and then the fun begins with going deep. And one of the often common patterns is what's a twist that makes what's the perfect solution for the basic one not quite perfect anymore. And if you don't know the fundamentals, you won't be able to follow that so easily. Um, I had one candidate, it was kind of funny. They just stopped me and said, "That's not how the question goes." You don't get to pick that. They ended up doing fine. It was just really funny that they let that like escaped from them. Um, anyway, so that's one is knowing the fundamentals that you follow the as the problem gets deeper. Um, I found that the book Cracking the Coding Interview is a good prep. Putting some time into it, you know, a couple times a week, every night, depending on how much time you have, what's et cetera, into solving the problems. It can make you know, as an entry level, it could make 25K, 50K, 100K annual pay differences depending on what tier of company you get to. And and how you thrive into it. Like it's one of the highest ROI things you can do if you're going for tier one opportunities.
And Joel, does that apply even to like new grad roles right out of college, or do you see that more applying later on when you're going into more senior roles?
So going on to later senior roles, the spread gets bigger, right? Like if you make the difference between a senior and a staff, might go from 300K annual total comp to 400 or more at total comp, right? And so if you could make a leveling choice, or you don't get down leveled out of a thing or rejected outright, or it opens up the tier of company you apply to, it can just have huge returns on your comp. And the job will be more satisfying. But as an entry level, you have less negotiating power. However, where you get the job, where you get the offers from matters.
Thank you, Joel.
Yep. Other one is like for the design stuff.
Yep.
Spend some time on the design stuff. Like something you should be able to, and there's lots of guides, is like you should be able to solve Bitly, a URL shortener. It's just a really, really common one that you get, and it's a pattern that fits many of these design problems. And how do you make it scale?
In your experience, Joel, this has been a question that comes up a lot. Is the system design question a common question for new grad or internship roles?
Yes. For internship, not so much. For entry level plus, yeah. I mean, the level of depth in the solution will vary, like what things they expect to catch without hinting. But yeah, I think you can expect to get a design problem.
Okay.
I'll probably be in the on-site portion, the concentrated portion, since a lot of these are on phone video anyways. But yeah. And if you go into infrastructure, the deeper in the stack you go, the more of them you'll get.
Thank you, Joel. All right, I'll hand it over to Tiffany, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit different of an approach, especially as you think through how many interviewees we might be engaging with as an employer. As we get later in the process and we're down selecting, it's as essential to know the company. So when we hire, we expect to be hiring somebody who wants to stay with us for 4 years or more, ideally a lifetime career. And doing your homework of knowing the company actually can make the difference between somebody who has us on the list of their 50 different companies they plan to interview with, versus somebody who's already starting to think about what our challenges might be and how they can contribute to solutions. So, going on a company, especially if it's a public company's website, and just really understanding where their product selection, their possible competition, probably gives you a heads up to the types of questions you might get, even from a design standpoint, and might give you the opportunity to seed a couple of words or suggestions in that really help us understand that you're as invested in us as we might want to be in you.
Thank you. I love that, Tiffany. Yes, you can really enjoy insert the lingo that they speak already in the interviews. That can really help. I appreciate that insight. Patrick, anything else you'd like to add to this?
Covered a lot of the broad strokes, but I'll be a little more pointed in this. Know what it is you're applying for, like know the role, whatever it is, what company it is, just know those things, and know your resume. If you can't answer every question about your resume, then the interviewer will find that out pretty quickly. I've done that because oftentimes your interviewer will find some connection to you and want to poke at it just because, oh, hey, I did that too. I did that to a candidate, and it was one tiny blurb on a very long resume, and he could not answer anything about it because he had forgotten about it because it was 5-6 years earlier. That was a bit more middle of his career, but it was something I had done as well, and I was just like, oh, hey, I know that too. Let's talk about it. And so that can happen, but if it's on your resume, you need to know it.
Yeah, just on the resume note, some people list expert and then they put 15 or 20 skills. No, you're not an expert in that many. If you claim expert, be prepared to go deep on that. Every now and then, I've seen interviewers will just pick something random from their expert list. It's okay to list a whole bunch of skills, but be expert in like 2 things, 3 things at the most, and really be prepared to go deep. If you say you're expert in Java, you should be able to go deep into language lawyer territory, etc.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Patrick. Pam.
I think everybody said a lot of what I was going to say. I would say just one other thing, just tacking it on is again, know what you're applying for, know the technical bar required for that role, but understand that that is not sufficient. Just echoing what Tiffany said, know the company, know what is important to them. At a place like Amazon, meeting the technical bar is just kind of the table stakes, right? It's about a whole lot of other things that you need to bring to the table and the potential for growth that a company would be evaluating you for.
Thank you, Pam. And Mustafa joined us as well. If you'd like to come online, hello there. What we were doing just now earlier is just a brief introduction. So tell us who you are in maybe less than a minute or so, and then I'd love to hear your perspective on this question as well. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mustafa. I'm class 2022 and worked at eBay for the first 3 years after I graduated, and just recently moved to next door. And I've had my fair share of interviews coming out of college during like the COVID season, and now during like the layoff. So I don't think that's quite how the tech industry has been before that. So I'll share what I've learned throughout that period and what I think students should be preparing for during their before their interviews. And I guess one mental thing that has helped me throughout that period is just reverse engineering the process and thinking about what does the company want to do. And that goes back to what Tiffany said, is like understanding what the company is. So depending on what the company is, you might think you want to stay there for a very long time or a short time. Sometimes like the company doesn't care. And from there, like you work on both technical and personal parts. Technical is not just about being able to solve lead code. There's the interviewing skill part where you're able to unstuck yourself once you get stuck, and be able to reason what you know and how to get to what you don't know from what you know. That clarity of thought, I thought, helped me a lot. It was one thing that I needed to work on. The other is like understanding company's values. So if a company values like expertise and deep areas, be ready to show that in your interviews. If they value quick learning, also be ready to show that in your interviews, like some way or another. And yeah, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Mustafa. The next question I have for us all is this one that I put in the chat. What are some of the most common mistakes candidates make in technical interviews, and how can they be avoided? We started to go into this a little bit just now when Mustafa's talking about this. And I'd like to ask Adam first, and we'll go in alphabetical order.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think a lot of it would just be the inverse of everything we just went through. So like giving canned answers that you're not prepared to double click into, not being, prepared in terms of like mindset, having enough sleep, etc. So you show up, you're very nervous, you're thinking he's brutal, etc. And then I think too, something we didn't touch on is, the importance of, asking questions, right? And so being prepared to actually asking questions, or the inverse of that, something not to do is to not ask questions. I think, rarely all of the available information that the interviewer has will be presented immediately. And that's because that's how problems come across your desk in the real world, right? With incomplete information. And so part of what we want to see is how you deal with that. And, ideally by proactively identifying unknowns and asking thoughtful questions to get to the bottom of them. So, yeah, I would say a common mistake is just assuming that all of the information that's available to you has already been presented, instead of, considering, okay, here's what I know, here's what I would like to know, and then asking questions to get at the heart of those unknowns.
Nice. Really good point. That's a common pitfall, actually, if you're doing your lead code problems so long and you know them by heart, and you see an interview question presented that looks very similar, you're just going to dive right in and solve it and forgot to ask the details. And maybe there's quite a big of a difference between what was asked and what you assume. So thanks for that. Dan, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of the bases and the natural anti-patterns from that. Like the other thing I might call out is is kind of on a similar vein, but like drawing too many assumptions about what the, I mean, it could be about anything really, what the interviewer is really looking for, what the scope of the problem is, why the problem is even important, which is, I think, a particularly important one for those of you who are interested in the PM track. Yeah, like there's never too much harm, in asking a sensible number of validating questions just to feel out what like is really the core of what the interview is looking for, whether that's in a technical problem or when they're asking about your experience on something, whatever it may be. It's good just to make sure that you're focusing on the right thing.
Thank you, Dan. Joel.
Yeah, I typed in the chat a little bit. One of the things that we're looking for, and this is more in the more senior ones, but no harm in starting early, the quality of how you scope the problem, the questions you ask, outline consciously the assumptions that are being made and validating them. It's just a sign of maturity in the problem space, being able to do that. And coming in, you don't want to be the person that never leaves that place. Then you start to seem like an architect type. If you're coming into a coding role and you never get to coding because you keep on asking questions, well, that doesn't cut it either. But digging in deeply, scoping it out is a really important step.
Nice. I appreciate that. Thank you. Mustafa.
It's a simple one, but you shouldn't be surprised by the interview structure or expectation. Ask what the loops will be, what each interviewer is going to ask you. And, some companies are more liberal in what they share than others. So you might be surprised what you get to know.
That's a really good point. I always like telling the students to ask the recruiter at that stage on any insights they can share about the interviewing team. Like Mustafa was saying, what questions they're asking, kind of what are the most common or what are usually the hardest things that the candidates face, so they can get a little bit of a heads up on that. And what I mean by that is, for example, the recruiter might say, well, most candidates do really do poorly on like a dynamic programming question that somebody is asking in this panel. So be prepared for that. So something concrete like that. Because at the stage of the technical interview, your recruiter is already in your corner. They want you to actually land that job because that's what they're there to do at the company, is to fill the role. So they'll be your friend at that stage, your ally. Thank you for that. Pam.
Agree with a lot of what's been said. I would add more of a tip for people, which is that it's okay to have a pause and gather your thoughts before just starting to dive right in. I've seen a lot of interviewees where they feel uncomfortable with a pause and they're just trying to keep going, but they don't have their structured thoughts together. So I would say it's okay, be comfortable. Just say, let me just gather my thoughts, or write some stuff down. I would much rather that than to have a rambling series of attempts at responding to a question.
Thank you. Great. Patrick.
I don't think it's been mentioned yet, but if it has, maybe I'm just being redundant here, is that a large part of the interview is communicating what's in your head to the interviewer and how you think. So if you're not explaining the steps that you're writing down or designing or whatever type of interview it is, if you're not conveying that, then the interviewer is just kind of looking at you solving like a test question, and that's not particularly interesting to them. They're not seeing how your mind works. You're not, and oftentimes talking about what's on your mind will help the interviewer lead you to the right answer. And then it becomes more of a collaborative interview. I know when I interview, and both as an interviewee and an interviewer, I am always trying to make it a collaborative process with me and the other person. And that only works if both parties are willing to talk it through, especially as the interviewee. It's definitely on you to make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you. Tiffany.
I was just vigorously nodding my head because Patrick said exactly what I felt was missing in the discussion. So I'll take a different angle because that was absolutely spot on. I want to know how you think more so than the answer, honestly. But another common mistake I find is back to what Adam was saying about mindset a little bit. Make sure that you are working with the recruiter to schedule an interview when you can be your best interviewee. To the point made, the recruiter is on your side. They want to fill this role. And to the best of their ability, if you are in a time zone that's multiple time zones away from the employer, make sure you're transparent about that. I can tell when somebody is tired and not being their best self because they're tired. That's actually a bit of a waste of time for me. I'd rather have shifted my time so that we could have the right conversation we need to have. So, you won't get 100% of what you ask for because it's also going to be based on my schedule, but at least be transparent about that. Try to advocate for a way that you can show up as your best self. Try to have space in between interviews if you're doing multiple in a day so that you are talking about my company and not accidentally talking about the prior. I'm very conscious of where we are in the current, working environment type market. And those little things can really help set you up for success or can be a pitfall if you don't advocate for yourself appropriately.
We're really closely related. Be very reluctant to interview if you're sick. Like the interviewers want you to succeed. The recruiter wants you to succeed. If you're sick, fighting a cold, etc., really check with the recruiter. Hey, I would really like to reschedule this. It's not an excuse to do bad in an interview because you're sick. You should have stepped out and done it the next day or a couple days later.
Thank you both, Tiffany and Joel, on this. Yeah, I think it's totally okay to reschedule. It's actually cool, because it shows that you're really really serious about wanting this position. So you want to be at your best. Okay, we talked a lot about technical questions so far, and I want to shift the gears a little bit towards soft skills, and we'll do it in reverse alphabetical order this time and start with Tiffany. And the question, I'll post it in the chat here as well. How important are soft skills versus technical skills in your company's hiring process, and how can candidates showcase them during an interview?
Yeah, this is a good one. I would say the comment was made already. The technical skills are table stakes. Solid technical skills even are becoming more and more table stakes as we as employers have options to assess through. Soft skills are important because as technical folks, we need to be able to listen to the needs of non-technical people and communicate to non-technical people. So your ability to distill down your technical know-how in a way that non-technical team members can understand is very important. And then even soft skills like collaboration, which will inevitably be collaboration across people who might have your subject expertise or who might not, is very important to somehow showcase, whether it's showcasing some of the leadership things that you've done outside of the classroom. There are a variety of different ways that you can show up as a whole person in your interview.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. Patrick.
Yeah, I'm just kind of repeat some of that and what I had said previously about talking with your interviewer is a collaborative process, and what it indicates is your ability to work as a team. Um, and in some ways, you're also interviewing the company in that way. Like if you can collaborate with these people, this might be a good role for you as well. Um, and so that shows that you can be, I hate to say like you're a team player. It's not really a team player, it's just that you can communicate what's on your mind to someone else and they can communicate it to you and you can receive it. That is something that's actually does happen day to day for technical roles. That's something in an interview that is reflective of your daily work life. And so that is important beyond the interview. And demonstrating it through communication during the interview is hugely important. It's sort of it's always kind of a vibe check for the team interviewing you to see if like, yeah, we could work with this guy or girl.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Patrick. Pam.
Sure. You ask how important are soft skills. I would say they are essential. There are actually, for Amazon, there are very specific questions that are asked to demonstrate specific skills for your role. So, speaking for product managers, they're very specific soft skills that we're looking for, as well as demonstration of what are called Amazon leadership principles. And so, if you were to, interview for a company like that, make sure you do the homework ahead of time to know what those skills they're looking for, what those leadership or values or whatever they're looking for, and be prepared to demonstrate. For undergrads applying straight out of school, obviously we don't have the expectation that you would have work examples to demonstrate those things, but you should still find examples from whether it's your internships or your extracurriculars or whatever way you can to demonstrate those other things, because again, technical skills will get you in, but it won't necessarily get you the job.
Thank you, Pam. Mustafa.
Yeah. I don't think soft skills are in the behavior interview. Soft skills are throughout the interview process, even in the technical parts of your interview. The way that you're able to backtrack from a wrong solution or be able to explain your solution, communicate with the interviewer in different ways tells a lot about your soft skills and your maturity in the workspace. That said, like a big part of that is also practice for interviews. So just keep that in mind. But I think one of the most important skills is like your ability to communicate technical ideas to technical and non-technical people, and being able to own the product and your mistakes in the development and the launch of that product are two of the biggest steps like I've seen next door vet candidates against.
I like that insight. It really permeates throughout the entire cycle of the interview. Joel, over to you.
Yeah. One of the things, someone argue that's actually a technical one, but I think it's a soft skill. One of the places, and tied back to the previous discussion, where candidates go wrong is an inability to say that they don't know something. And they try and go into the baffle with bullshit mode, and they just can't say, I don't know. The other, what the interviewers are often looking, what is the limits of their ability, and also do they know their ability, those limits. The other one is that comes right afterwards when you say I don't know or you get stuck, is they want you to succeed, and they're going to hint. And you get candidates that for whatever reason, their head's not in the right game, they're too tired, like we talked about earlier, but they're just not picking up the hints. They're not able to shift off of whatever idea they had and move forward. So when the interviewer is suggesting things, they're not doing it lightly. Like every single thing that they say is transmitting information that is key to the problem. And so really embrace it. Like, why did they say it? Where is it going to be used?
Joel, why is it so important to be able to say you don't know and the ability to pick up on hints? How does that translate into the real world in the job?
Yeah, I mean, code coding, product development. These are team sports, and getting a little metaphysical, like people like Ray Dalio from Bridgewater talk about, all of us have strengths, all of us have weaknesses, and you need to know you don't have to fix your weaknesses necessarily, but you have to be paired and partnered with a team that complements your weaknesses and move forward. If you can say I don't know, then it can, hey, maybe you schedule a story spike to go learn something. Hey, it's not time to dive in. Or maybe we find another person in the company or in the team that is familiar with this area and can bootstrap it. Uh, like, but to just say dive in and do it, you're going to waste a lot of time. You're going to do a sub-quality result, and it's super suboptimal.
Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, just Brown is such a competitive space, and there's such a strong feeling that you have to have it all figured out and know all the time. And then I think when you're landing in the industry and working together with a team, and you choose to bullshit your way through rather than saying you don't know, might actually lead the whole team down a wrong path. So you're wasting a lot of people's time in that case. So another thing I think is really important there as well. Okay, Dan, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, big +1 to the previous discussion. And honestly, like, if you think the interview is fishing for something, like, let's just say it's not that hard to ask them in a way that doesn't make you look like an idiot. I think that's like the prevailing fear, is that it makes you look like an idiot. But you could just say like, hey, like, is there a particular angle here that, like, or a particular insight you have that, like, you'd want me to really consider, right? And sometimes maybe, or once in a while, the test will be like, is this person experienced enough or sharp enough to pick up on that thing? But most of the time, it's just like, if you were given the information, it'd be a bonus if you self-identified, but it's more important that you could work your way through it. Somebody else might have the insight anyway in a real work setting. So you can just unearth it that way and proceed and tackle the problem. And you could think of it as partial credit, or it's better than leaving a bad taste in somebody's mouth if they feel like you're just trying to invent stuff that you don't actually know. But yeah, my other point, my main point was just going to be more on like the values and whatever side. There's a very large, diverse set of companies out there that are hiring. Many of them have different cultures. Not every culture is for everybody. Be honest with yourself as to what kind of work environment you can actually succeed in, so you don't waste your time. You don't waste everyone else's time. Like, some companies are highly mission driven. It is fine if you are not a highly mission driven person and would not succeed there. That is not a judgment against you in any sort of way. You should feel comfortable acknowledging that for yourself. And on the other hand, like, don't apply to a company that is building something that you consider meaningless if all you want to do is build something that, like, it builds something that, like, really, like, benefits the world, or something like saves people's lives. Like, you'll be miserable. Find something that works.
Just super quick, tying back to what Dan was saying earlier, with the hinting. Don't never give up in the interview. Like, you can say I don't know, but they want you to try, right? So push against it. I've seen a few candidates who just give up, and it's not. Well, that's basically the end of the interview for all practical purposes, right? There's going to be a sequence of hints. They're going to push. They really want you to succeed. Go for it. Do your best. You give up, you know what the answer is.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you
Yeah.
both. Adam.
Yeah, sure. So agree with everyone that social or soft skills are extremely important for any job. I think that's especially true for product management, right? And the reason is that, like, yes, you're quote unquote managing a product, but you're not writing code, except in rare cases. You're not designing mockups. You're trying to get other people to do that in a way that aligns with, the way you think it should be done. And those are other employees that you don't have direct authority over. So it all comes down to your ability to lead and influence folks. And so things like executive presence, the ability to inspire direction, et cetera, are just critical to your ability to do the job successfully. And I think there's just, for every job, a bucket of soft skills that you have to master and you're going to be evaluated for in terms of like your ability to do the job well. And then there's also an element where the interview is trying to see what would it be like to spend 8 to 12 hours a day with you, for 5 to 7 days a week. And so likability is important, right? No one wants to work with a jerk. I think that there's just like very basic ways to convey likability, right? It's just being a human. So when you come in, do you shake the interviewer's hand and look them in the eye? Or if you're remote, do you make eye contact via the camera to the extent possible? Perhaps, if it seems like the culture of the company you're interviewing for would be accommodative to it, do you start the interviewer by asking them how their day is going, even potentially, if you're really good, getting into some personal things. And again, different companies will, that'll work, better or worse depending on the culture. But again, just demonstrating likability, demonstrating that you'd be pleasant to work with, I think is sort of another bucket of why soft skills are critical in addition to your ability to do the job.
Thank you. I'd like to ask another question that is sort of related to what we've been talking about now in regards to getting stuck, not knowing the answer, saying I don't know. Like, how do you actually navigate that situation well? We've heard a couple of hints. Dan was saying, like, is there another angle that you'd like me to look at? Like, let me hear some hints, but I'd like to know from others as well. How should candidates approach such a question when they don't immediately know the answer or they get stuck throughout the time? And I'd like to start with Pam.
So I think it's been said before. I do think taking a pause, but also figuring out what questions will help you, right? So being comfortable to take a step back, right, and not just try to meander your way through something. So having the maturity to step back and just kind of maybe acknowledge that you don't know, but also then figure out what are the right questions that will help you get to the next step.
Thank you. Patrick?
I'll go sort of a different route with this, is that you can sort of get the interviewer to give you hints. If you may not know the right solution, but you have some idea of a direction to take, you can say, I think this is not the right answer, or maybe this is not the most optimal answer, but I'm going to try this because this is what comes to mind and we can work through it. Because that's, again, how the real world works from the technical side of things, is like, you might not have the best solution from the get-go. You might know it off the top of your head, or there's a good chance that there's some library out there that does it for you, but you need to implement it here in this interview. So and you got 20, 30, 45 minutes to solve it. And starting with something gives the interviewer a way to start directing you towards the solution that they're looking for. So even if you don't know, trying something is better than giving up.
Love that. Thank you, Patrick. Tiffany.
I think we've mentioned quite a few things already that I won't repeat, but I think it's also good to be aware of when you're getting stuck. Is this the first question on the first interview, or is this the third question on your fourth interview? I know, at least for us, when we're doing multiple rounds of interviews, there is information that I have as your fourth interviewer that got relayed to me from the prior interviewers. So I'm going to start probably multiple layers down compared to where you might have started at the beginning of the process. I think Joel might have made the point earlier, we are looking for that point where you might really be at the end of your expertise, and how you relay that to me, how you ask me questions to help further your thinking, how you solicit me to help turn this into a collaborative process. There have been times where we have solved problems together because I may be bringing you a real world current issue for us, just to see how you would approach it. I'm also aware, if you are an entry-level candidate, that you might reach that dead end faster I would expect a more senior candidate to take longer. I'm also aware that an entry-level candidate is most likely joining a team that has senior level folks on it. And so hearing how you are willing to acknowledge your limitations and solicit help tells me how you will integrate into that team, where you will have to be most efficient by asking questions of your colleagues. So be conscious of where you are in the interview process, and then, pose your questions accordingly to try and get the help you need from your interviewer.
Tiffany, am I hearing kind of like a kind of a theme here where you're actually sometimes trying to trip up the candidate in like a really difficult way, maybe to a question that even you haven't found out the answer to?
Correct.
Just
Yeah,
to see what they're
we
doing?
will push you to the limits, whether we're talking, software engineering or other types of sciences. I mean, for those of you who are looking for internships, part of our internship of end of summer evaluation, we will ask you questions until you can't answer them. We do similarly in an interview process, because I need to know how you approach when you don't have the answer. You will have a situation as a full-time employee where you don't have the answer. I
Yes.
have that every week. And my success is knowing how to chase the answer, or call up phone a friend and say, hey, I've got this challenge. Can you help me work it out? And if our least successful hires are people who want to solve every problem on their own and haven't shaken the college vibe of trying to solve a problem set on your own, versus the workplace where you are working extremely collaboratively.
So you're facing something that you don't know every week, huh? That reminds me a lot about my time in tech as well. Okay, that makes sense. I like that. That's reassuring. We have a few minutes left in this interview, so I'm going to ask one more question to the group, which is, what else should our students know we haven't talked about today? Is there like something that you're just, you need to impart on us before we say bye? And this is an open question, whoever would like to chime in first.
Going back to the soft skills and all this stuff, we're looking for people who are alive. Like, we want you to be engaged. We want you, like, you get like the first time I interviewed somebody from Russia. Fortunately, I had a partner in the room. I thought he was grim, right? But they explained to me, hey, that's just a Russian thing. But they want you to be engaged, alive, attached, really be in it, be excited to be there, transmit that you're excited to be there.
Thank you, Joel. Who else?
Could I chime in for a moment?
Yes.
Remember that you're a person and you're interviewing with a person. People, they're fallible, they make mistakes. You might feel intimidated by them because they're in a position where they can accept or reject you. And that can suck because you're not really on equal footing. So when they make a mistake, it's not as bad for them as it is for you. I've had examples where I've shown up to an interview and the interviewer wasn't there. Didn't show up for 45 minutes, completely missed the interview, and I drove over an hour to have this job, and it didn't work out. And there was nothing I could do about it because the other person made a mistake, and that just happens. So just keep in mind that like there will be lots of mistakes on your end and on the other person's end, and the best you can do is just work through it and hope for the best, and then work and to try to do better the next time for what things you can control.
Brilliant. Thank you, Patrick. Who
I'd like
else?
to chime in and suggest keeping things in perspective, right? It's just a job. In this case, it's just your first job. It doesn't define you, right? Obviously, you want to, make a good selection into the early stages of your career. But ultimately, if you fail an interview, it's certainly not the end of the world. So yeah, keeping that in perspective, knowing that it's okay to fail, despite, I think anyone in this room or who's going to be watching this video at Brown probably doesn't have a lot of experience with failure in your life. Good to get comfortable with it, because it's going to happen, and that's okay. And you can apply to as many jobs as you need to until you eventually get one. you know, as long as you, you know, keep a positive mindset through that failure and just stay persistent, something will eventually land.
There's some lore that Google ran a test internally with engineers. You know, it's a big enough company. They had a bunch of internal engineers pretend that they had applied to jobs and actually interview, and never tell the person that who was interviewing them that they were actually already at Google. And 50% of them failed their interviews. Like, it's just going to happen. They were clearly qualified. They were successful engineers at the company. So anti-loop is going to happen. Don't take it
Maybe
personally.
if we could like extend that, like by show of hands, who here has ever failed an interview?
Oh my, absolutely. Okay, so we won't see this on the recording, but everybody had their hands up. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Adam. On that note, thank you so much for joining this panel. I really appreciate all of your perspectives. This was awesome. Thanks so much for spending this time with us today. I'm going to stop the recording.